A group of alchemists were chasing something impossible, a potion that could grant eternal life. Instead, buried in their failed experiments, they stumbled onto something that would end up reshaping castles, kingdoms, and the entire nature of war itself. They weren't trying to build a weapon. They were trying to cheat death, and what they found instead would go on to end lives by the millions. This is the story of how one accident changed the world forever. Welcome to the story behind it, where we dig into the hidden histories behind the objects and inventions that quietly built the modern world. If stories like this pull you in, hit subscribe now, because this one's a wild ride. Let's start with the basics. Gunpowder, sometimes called black powder, isn't a single substance at all. It's a carefully balanced mixture of 3 separate ingredients, each playing its own distinct role in creating one of history's most explosive discoveries. The first is saltpeter, also known as potassium nitrate. Think of it as the oxygen supplier, the ingredient that feeds the reaction, the fuel it needs to burn violently rather than just smolder. The second is charcoal, which acts as the fuel itself, the material that actually burns. And the third is sulfur, which lowers the temperature needed to ignite the mixture and intensifies the resulting explosion. Balance all 3 correctly, and you get one of the most transformative substances in human history. Get the balance wrong, and you get nothing at all, or something far too unstable to control. That balancing act has a story stretching back over 1,000 years. Our story begins in China, sometime around the 9th century, during the Tang Dynasty. At the time, alchemists across the empire were obsessed with a singular goal: discovering the elixir of immortality, a legendary potion said to grant eternal life. What they found instead was combustible, unpredictable, and far from anything they were looking for. In their pursuit of eternal life, these alchemists had accidentally created the formula for gunpowder. At first, this discovery didn't lead to armies or warfare at all. It found its earliest use in fireworks and early, primitive weapons, simple bombs and rudimentary rockets built to harness this newly discovered explosive power. But an invention this powerful was never going to stay in one place for long. Slowly, knowledge of gunpowder began traveling west along the Silk Road, reaching the Middle East, and eventually making its way into Europe, where it would be picked up, studied, and transformed by a whole new set of hands. By the final decades of the 14th century, gunpowder had stopped being a curiosity. It had become essential to how wars were fought. European craftsmen and engineers had refined the substance for battlefield use, giving rise to 2 devastating new categories of weaponry: cannons, capable of leveling walls that had stood for centuries, and handheld firearms, which would eventually replace the sword and the bow entirely. If you're the kind of person who loves uncovering how a single accidental discovery can reshape entire centuries of history, that's exactly what we do here at The Story Behind It. So make sure you're subscribed for what's coming next. So where did these 3 critical ingredients actually come from? Saltpeter, the most essential of the 3, could be found naturally in certain mineral deposits, though it was also produced through various chemical and organic processes historically tied to nitrate-rich decomposing matter. Charcoal, meanwhile, was produced by burning wood in low oxygen conditions, a controlled process known as pyrolysis, which left behind a lightweight, porous material that caught fire quickly and burned efficiently. And sulfur could be mined directly from the earth, often found in volcanic regions, or produced through other extraction methods. Sourcing these 3 ingredients was only the beginning. Turning them into something battlefield-ready required careful, precise craftsmanship, a process refined and guarded closely by those who mastered it, since even small errors could make the difference between a weapon that worked and one that didn't work at all. Once finished, gunpowder wasn't something you could just leave lying around. It was extraordinarily sensitive to heat, to sparks, to even simple friction. That volatility made proper storage absolutely critical. Historically, gunpowder was kept in sealed wooden barrels or metal containers, often housed in isolated storage buildings specifically positioned away from populated areas to minimize the damage if something went wrong. And things did go wrong. Throughout history, accidental explosions were a recurring deadly risk. Each disaster pushed forward stricter regulations and safer handling procedures. Workers involved in gunpowder production adopted increasingly careful protective measures, understanding that a single mistake could be catastrophic. The impact of gunpowder on human civilization is almost impossible to overstate. Its arrival made centuries-old defensive strategies instantly obsolete. The towering fortress walls and heavily armored cavalry that once dominated battlefields could no longer guarantee protection or victory. Warfare itself was permanently rewritten. But gunpowder's influence reached far beyond the battlefield. It became essential to mining and excavation, clearing paths for infrastructure and construction projects that would have been impossible by hand alone. And in a strange twist, the same substance responsible for so much destruction also became the foundation of one of the world's most beloved forms of celebration, fireworks. Looking back, it's remarkable to consider how a simple 3-ingredient mixture, discovered entirely by accident, by alchemists chasing something else entirely, ended up reshaping military history, global exploration, and industrial progress all at once. From its accidental origins in ancient China to its decisive role in redefining modern warfare, gunpowder's legacy is stamped permanently across human history. Understanding where it came from and how thoroughly it transformed the world around it gives us a much deeper appreciation for just how much one unexpected discovery can change everything. If this story caught your attention, that's exactly the kind of history we dig into every episode. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one, right here on The Story Behind It. Have you ever stopped to wonder where the things around you come from? How is glass made? Why is it called Bluetooth? Who invented paper? Why do airplane windows have tiny holes? The answers are often more fascinating than you might imagine. Welcome to The Story Behind It. This is the channel where we uncover the hidden stories behind the everyday things you use, see, eat, and rely on every single day. From the history of common objects to the science behind everyday life, from factory production lines to the origins of famous brands and inventions, we explore the facts that shape our world. Every episode is carefully researched and presented in a clear, engaging documentary style, making complex ideas simple, interesting, and easy to understand. Whether it's a household item, a food, a material, or a piece of technology, there's always a remarkable story waiting to be discovered. If you're curious about how things are made, where they come from, and why they exist, you've found the right place. Subscribe to The Story Behind It, and join us as we uncover the fascinating stories behind the ordinary. Because every object has a history, every invention has a purpose, and every everyday thing has a story behind it.